from the streets of New York City, Porkins Policy Radio. Here's Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond. You can find this show here live every Tuesday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern at ocelli.com. And, of course, you can also find it on my website, which is porkinspolicyreview.com. If you are new to the show, there are lots of ways to listen. You can, of course, find everything archived at my website and also at Chuck Ocelli's as well. You can follow the RSS feed directly on my site. And, of course, you can subscribe on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, Player FM, Podbean. Pretty much all minor and major podcatchers have the feed. If there is one that you use that I don't mention, please let me know so we can link up to it on the website and promote it as well. You can also subscribe on YouTube if that is your preferred method of listening to podcasts. And if you would like to support my work, then you can always go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond, and you can sign up to become a subscriber for as little as $1 a month. And, of course, that single solitary dollar gives you access to the exclusive monthly bonus podcast. And the bonus podcast, once again, was uploaded to just shy of September. It was still August when I uploaded it. I did sort of cheat a little bit, and I posted an interview that I actually did for Aaron Franz's subscribers on Patreon. But it was a good discussion nonetheless, and Aaron was kind enough to allow me to share that with all of my subscribers. And I'll probably mention this a little bit in the second hour, but there was some very important news that I did include in that bonus podcast. So if you haven't listened to it or you haven't heard about the news, then I encourage you to go and sign up. But today, here in the first hour, we are joined by a good friend and a frequent guest, although it has been a little while since he has been on the show. But I want to welcome back good friend JP Sottille, of course, the man behind newsvandal.com, and, of course, the Newsvandal Rundown, which I encourage everyone to subscribe to. JP, how are you? Good to have you back on.
I'm great. How you doing, Pierce? By the way, I like that there is an Easter egg hidden in a bonus podcast. That's great stuff.
Yeah, I guess it won't be much of an Easter egg because I probably will talk a little bit about it in the second hour. But
okay. Well, yeah. It's a teaser then.
Yeah, exactly. It's a teaser. Yeah. I should do more Easter egg things. But maybe that's something we'll think about in the future. But JP, it really has been a while since you've been on the show, but I'm glad to have you here. Again, people should definitely check out newsvandal.com. And,
it's understandable, Pierce, because you've been down the rabbit hole.
Yes, yeah.
Basically this avocation you've had for years suddenly exploded all over the place and became a hot property. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And, it's funny you mentioning it. I made a big deal about it last week. So, okay, this is the last episode I'm going to do on this. And then, of course, right after I finished doing my show, I was being interviewed about Epstein. So and I haven't posted that. That's an interview I did with Ed Opperman for the Opperman Report. I'll post that up on my site soon. It'll be on the, in the podcast feed. But so one final thing on Epstein before I take a slight break from that. But as faithful listeners will know that I have sort of like the Epstein overload has been a bit much, and I have wanted to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about some issues that I've sort of ignored a bit because of the Epstein stuff, or some things that aren't getting as much attention because of that. And I guess let's start, JP, with something that I'm kind of embarrassed to say I rarely, if ever, cover on the show, and that is the sort of impending climate, catastrophe, disaster, apocalypse that seems to be inching ever closer. And I'm referring to, I mean, you have actually been writing about this quite a bit, JP, but I will direct people to a recent op-ed piece you did that's on truthout.org entitled, well, "We Can't Confront Climate Change While Lavishly Funding the Pentagon." And there'll also be some other articles on Truthout that you have written this year about the sort of climate disaster. But maybe we'll start with this recent op-ed because it's it's like I said, I'm kind of embarrassed that I haven't talked about it much. And if I'm being totally honest, I've sort of ignored it. It's like you kind of just push it out of your mind, and it's unfortunately it's very easy to kind of with all the other problems that we have geopolitically, but also just in our everyday personal life. Everyone's hurting in this economy. Everyone's overworked. It's easy to kind of forget about climate change and how it's how terrifying it is. And I've certainly done that. And then I was texting you earlier today that I'm now officially depressed and terrified, having read through your recent pieces. But I mean, I guess first, JP, before we dive into this recent piece on Truth Out, I mean, what do you make of the fact that people have sort of ignored this for so long? Even people like myself that I tend to think of myself as being knowledgeable or sort of I don't know, in the know, so to speak, when it comes to pressing global events and things like that. But it's very easy for people to kind of forget. And you mentioned I don't know if it's in this article or in your article about the the Earth being a bill collector. You talk about people are sort of now into climate dread, and which is maybe even worse in a way. So just what do you think about this?
Yeah, let's start there because it's interesting. With my doing the rundown, I have a few hundred science websites I visit regularly. And what I get there often are more unfiltered, direct from climate science takes on what's going on. And one of the things that I've seen popping up over the last 3 or 4 months is some reporting that climate scientists have been underestimating their real projections publicly because they've been afraid that if they say this is actually what's going to happen, that the 2 degree Celsius mark from the Paris Accords and all that stuff, that's all not realistic. We're talking about a massive spike in the ocean rise and massive melt off of Greenland, all of these things. They didn't want to put that out there because they were afraid people would just shut down in the face of that information. And I do think that is a part of it. Now, I've been charting this for a long time. There are a couple things here. One is in the alternative media space, I think climate change, which used to be called global warming, which now the nomenclature is moving, I think, towards climate crisis, which is actually something I'm kind of willing to embrace. There was a sense that maybe climate change was not totally vetted, that it wasn't totally real, that it may have been a part of some kind of, globalist conspiracy to shut down people moving and to change our system of energy use to try and control us and all of these kinds of things. And I think that had currency in a number of different spaces in alternative media. And the climate denial machinery, which the Koch brothers were a big part of funding, and Shell and major corporations were a big part of funding through the American Petroleum Institute and whatnot, have been incredibly effective over the years in putting just enough doubt in. And there have been a number of analyses done. I think Center for Public Integrity did one a few years ago that showed that the playbook that was being used to create doubt about climate change was almost exactly the same playbook that was used by Big Tobacco during their battles over cancer and public health. So that's all had a very significant impact. I think the fascinating thing to me is to watch what's happened in the last 18 months. And there has been a radical shift in public perception of climate change. It has gone from, 40 to 50% kind of being, maybe the science is still out. No. Now we're up to like 65, 68% people say, no, climate change is a real thing and it matters to us. And it's really been Mother Nature that's brought that change around. This last spring, the central part of the United States, the Midwest and the upper Midwest, experienced 2 bomb cyclones in the span of like 4 or 5 weeks. Bomb cyclones. Major weather events, catastrophic, unusual, extreme weather events that had never actually happened in anybody's memory, and then 2 of them happened. That led to massive flooding, killing off livestock, destroying crops, destroying fields, destroying homes. I think what's happening is that these weather events, and you can see the obsessiveness with hurricanes. Now already cable news loves to obsess on hurricanes just because that's like, money in the bank, right? To have a guy standing out in the, or a gal
blowing
standing
around
out being blown around. But now we've had I think this was the 4th or 5th Category 5 hurricane in the last 10 years. That is another anomaly. So these anomalies are mounting, and then the heat waves, right? Europe having these catastrophic heat waves, people dying from heat waves, people experiencing heat waves in the southeast, which leads me to the piece I wrote for Truth Out, which was rooted initially in this story by NBC News and Inside Climate News cooperative investigation. Starts with the death of a guy named Sergeant Kleins, who died of heat exhaustion, heat stroke, training in Georgia. And the U.S. military has had this spike, this incredible spike in heat-related training deaths on so-called Black Flag days, and that just pricked up my ears. I mean, it's when you start to get these kinds of real-world, experiential interactions with climate change, people start to change the way they feel about it. But at the same time, I think it also leads to it's like a fast track to dread, because what can you do about it, right? What can be done about bomb cyclones? And it's not like even like Ebola. Well, we can work on a vaccine and we can quarantine people, and Ebola is scary. But no, we're talking about whole ecosystems radically changing and flooding happening on biblical level. I mean, these are things that I think cause people to both change their position on climate change very quickly, and then maybe want to check out from the debate very quickly as well.
Yeah, no, and I'm like I said, I'm kind of guilty of that as well. It's very easy in the face of that. It's sort of like, okay, I guess the little recycling is great, sure, but is that really going to stop bomb cyclones?
Yeah, right. No, because this is about the fundamental nature of how our civilization is organized. And as you know, and as anybody who's listened to me on your show or Chuck's show or anywhere, I'm obsessed with oil. I'm obsessed with the interaction between oil and defense. And now I'm obsessed with the interaction between oil, defense, and climate. And if you think about the pervasiveness of oil in every aspect of our lives, then you start to think about oil as being the use, the extraction, and the use of oil as being a primary driver of climate change and all of its permutations. How you cope with that and how you deal with that, it seems like a no-win scenario.
Oh yeah, and that's it seems so daunting. And you lay out a fairly I want to say pessimistic viewpoint or it's dire. Let's put it that way. But the link between empire and climate change is particularly fascinating. And this isn't to sort of say that this is the ultimate reason behind all the various sort of environmental problems, although it does lead to a lot. And if people are looking for a sort of a quick fix to this. And this would be a radical shift. But as you were just saying there, JP, I mean, this is about restructuring the fundamental nature of how our society is built. I mean, the easiest way to fight climate change would be to cut the Pentagon and quite literally stop the sort of desire to control world oil markets. And you you point out like one that I think some people are kind of fairly aware of, that we've used we're using so much oil, which is obviously not beneficial to the environment. And you point out that the Department of Defense is the largest consumer of oil in the world, or petroleum.
The largest institutional consumer of oil. Not, I mean, you're not compared to a country, but
yes,
as a
exactly,
single institution. Yeah.
And that has obviously been focused in places like the Middle East, which are already hot to begin with. But all of this has also exacerbated the problem in the Arctic. And maybe you can talk a little bit about this, JP, because I think this is like an interesting way of kind of bringing people into this conversation. Because, the climate question is this sort of broad existential thing. We should be, it should be kind of like, an alien invasion. All of the world should be sort of united and put aside their differences in order to fight this, giant sort of disaster. And within that is also, we need to kind of stop fighting each other in these endless wars. But talk about the fact that the Arctic is now melting due to this, and how the Pentagon is ultimately exploiting this, and in particular Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated by feedback loops that become perpetual mechanisms. And so, for example, if we talk about sort of a conspiratorial edge to the things, the oil companies have known since the late 60s, early 70s for sure. Definitely by the late 70s, I've seen some of the data. Their scientists were predicting much of what we're seeing right now. And have they been, funding denialism because they knew that the Arctic was going to melt, and the Arctic, which was heretofore impenetrable, now all of those vast resources will be open to exploitation. Well, whether that's intentional or not, that's exactly what's happened. So let's lay this out. I postulate that climate change is a byproduct of empire. And you start with FDR meeting with King Saud in 1945 and the beginning of the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia. We will protect you. You will make sure that the oil comes out through our transmission protectorate. Okay, so we're going to protect the transmission of that oil out. We're going to take our cut. That oil is going to flow freely. That free flow of oil fueled what? It fueled American empire. So American empire was established in no small part to protect the transmission of oil, the extraction of it, and then that became a predicate for more empire because you had to keep protecting that oil. And that would then turn into what? It turned into the massive growth of the U.S. auto industry, the massive growth of the U.S. defense industry, and sort of an iron triangle, an interlocking economic system between oil and defense, which I think anybody who listens to your show has been an observer of U.S. militarism and U.S. Imperial power. Oil and defense have gone hand in hand all along over the last 70 years. And so this has done what? It's catalyzed this massive increase in carbon dioxide, which has caused this massive warming, which is doing what? Which is melting the Arctic, whether by design or not. But whether by design or not doesn't matter to Mike Pompeo, because at a recent meeting of the Arctic Council, which is Norway, Finland, Canada, the United States, countries with Arctic spheres of influence getting together, they wanted to issue a communique at the end saying that the massive melt-off of the Arctic region is cause for great concern, and we have to do things to protect ecosystems, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And Mike Pompeo said, no, I'm not going to sign off on that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go in front of all of you while you're standing there and tout the incredible new bonanza that awaits us in terms of mineral resources, oil resources, gas resources, the wonderful opportunity to change shipping routes now that the once impenetrable ice is gone, and now we can ship. And isn't it just this is great. This is great for everybody. And so the rest of the Arctic Council is aghast, but it makes a lot of sense. There's an internal logic to it, which is now that this is open, we want to be part of this scramble for the Arctic. People, if you know something about history, you know about the scramble for Africa in the 19th century. All of Europe saw these resources. Everybody tried to get their piece of Africa. We're kind of at the beginning of that now with the Arctic. As a matter of fact, China and Russia have already started cooperative exploratory drilling in the Arctic region. And so the Pentagon has long been a believer. I even hate to use that term because it makes it sound like it's like, it's like talking
something
about
to be disbelieved.
Yeah. Do you believe that the Earth is round? I don't even want to go there. But it's been touted many times by people who are concerned about climate change, environmentalists. They would say even the Pentagon believes in it, and this has gone back for a decade. And yes, they believe in it. Why? Because they're planning for it. And they've been planning for it for a long time. And as a matter of fact, just in January of this year, they issued another big report on it. And in there, they talk about the Arctic and what the Arctic means for Pentagon planning. And so Mike Pompeo's saying, hey, there's this new scramble happening here. And isn't it great that our hydrocarbon-based empire has opened up the Arctic? Well, guess what? Our hydrocarbon-based empire is going to have to start allocating funds to extend American hegemony over the Arctic because we don't want to lose out on the scramble for resources in the Arctic. So not only is climate a byproduct of empire, it is now becoming the predicate for more empire. And it's not just about the scramble for the Arctic. It's also about, I think, beginning to create a garrison state, because one of the things the Pentagon is keenly aware of is the coming migration of whole populations who are displaced by the effects of climate change, whether it's drought or flooding or massive weather events and other destabilizing aspects, food shortages, because if David Wallace Wells has written about this. If you start to project out what climate scientists think is the more likely and more dire impact of climate change, you could have major famines and major droughts and major displacement of individuals, which is going to lead to what? Is going to lead to people wanting to form a wall around their country and shoot people before they get in, create a garrison state. And I think that we are in the preliminary stages of seeing that happen.
You can even point to, and you do, this alleged migrant crisis as the and I don't mean alleged like it's not happening. People are fleeing, but the way the right wing has sort of whipped it up into this fervor. It's so funny that so many of the people that are making it into this, they're coming here, they're invading, are the same people that sort of deny that the environment is degrading rapidly. And you look at a lot of these places like El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and elsewhere. I mean, a lot of them are leaving because drought, water scarcity, deforestation. Yep. A lot of problems that are sort of man-made. And again, I'll just point this out because people kind of miss it. But like famine is only man-made. There are no natural famines, so to speak. Famines only exist because people, an external force sort of screwing things up. So you're seeing a lot of these people fleeing. And of course, these are countries, like you point out, that actually have like some of the lowest carbon emissions.
Right.
And they are kind of fleeing. And once again, there's sort of this like sick circular cycle to it where, again, this is, we're making things worse. People are fleeing. This justifies we got to build that wall, send troops down there.
That's right.
To take up arms. So it's sort of this like self-fulfilling prophecy. And I mean, JP, this is sort of a larger question. I don't know if we can answer it, but I mean, do you see this? Like, what's their end game? Because like it does seem like, okay, even if we controlled all the oil, so then what? Then what do we do then? And how does it, like, I don't understand what, these oil companies, the defense department it's so ridiculous. They obviously see the writing on the walls, yet they're not willing to like actually do something to stop it. They're just, well, we just have to prepare for it. which seems kind of strange. And I mean, is there like an end game to this, or is this just sort of like these people don't care? They'll just sort of use up everything, and even if the world gets extremely hot, they'll live in, I don't know, geodesic air-conditioned domes while the rest of us burn to death outside.
Yeah, no, I think there are people who believe that, and I've actually put a story more than once on the rundown in the last 2 years about the luxury bunker industry.
Mm.
It's a real thing, folks. Bloomberg just had a story a couple, maybe even it was like 6 or 8 weeks ago that I put at the top of the rundown as the lead story. Luxury bunkers. Naomi Klein, who I interviewed years ago for a documentary I made on proto-fascism in America, I did in 2008 at the end of the Bush administration, W administration. She talked about the wealthy believing ultimately that they can helicopter themselves out of any catastrophe or crisis. And it's kind of similar to rapture culture if you think about it, right? Everything around me can go to hell in a handbasket, but I've got a get out of catastrophe free card, whether it's through wealth or through, my spot in the rapture. I mean, I know it's sort of maybe a slightly facile comparison, but actually it kind of isn't, because if you think about what American economics comes from, it comes from the Protestant work ethic and Calvinism, and it's deeply rooted in Puritan culture and has been transmitted and become the prosperity gospel and a number of different weird, what we would think of as weird neoliberal justifications for the profit motive. And we do not think in terms of long term. We think in terms of quarter to quarter and short term. So we're not really designed as a culture to deal with this kind of long-term transition. And I do think that people get what you can while you can, enjoy it while you can, because it may not be here tomorrow. And that may seem Zen, living in the moment, but it's kind of suicidal, frankly. I'm not really sure where we're going with this, because there are a couple ways of looking at it. I think there is an end game at play. I think the end game is for oil. I actually think that oil is a doomed resource. There was a BNP Paribas analysis that just came out a couple weeks ago, and I'm writing about this. This is going to be my next piece for Truth Out, on how we're subsidizing our own destruction. And in that, they postulate or project out that with the rapid increase in technology and renewable energy sources, particularly wind and solar, the fact that they are growing exponentially in technological strength, which means the cost per megawatt hour is declining precipitously as the efficiency is growing, that with that in play right now, within 10 to 15 years, oil is going to have to be between $10 and $15 a barrel to compete. $10 to $15 per barrel. The inflection point, the point at which oil is no longer profitable to continue to produce right now, sits between $40 and $50 per barrel. And that's with the oil industry being heavily subsidized. Folks, you want to know what the defense budget is? It's a giant subsidy for the oil industry. Imagine if Chevron and Shell and ExxonMobil had to get together and put their own Fifth Fleet in Bahrain to protect the Strait of Hormuz, and to protect the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and to protect the Suez Canal, and to protect those transmission points. What if the oil companies had to field naval power in the South China Sea to try and forestall China exploiting the oil resources of the South China Sea? What if they had to pay for that? They don't have to pay for that. They don't, right? So oil is also heavily glutted. The oil market, there's more oil than we can use. Why do you think the Trump administration is spending time going after CAFE standards, going after gasoline efficiency standards for cars? Why are they doing that? Nobody wants them. The car companies didn't want them. The oil companies weren't really even lobbying for them, at least not publicly. I think they do it quietly, because I think that the Trump administration is one of the great sort of stealth oil presidencies ever. the Koch brothers being openly against them, but I think quietly supporting them, because then they get to basically virtue signal that we're not bad, we're not like Trump, even though Trump is basically giving us our wish list. Why are they going after efficiency standards? Because efficiency is killing the Saudis. It's killing the oil companies. And they've got to do anything they can to try and get more oil used, because there's a giant glut. If there's a story today, I'm sorry I'm going off on this, but there's a story today
please.
On Wall Street Journal about the Saudis once again struggling economically because they can't get the price of oil up to $80 a barrel. Well, there was a point in Obama's administration when oil dropped to $26 a barrel. That's 26. Saudi Arabia could not pay its civil servants. Russia's economy was contracting. And luckily, Trump came along, played a lot of games with the Iran nuclear deal, introduced instability into the Middle East, which introduces instability into the oil market, which introduces a price hike to the oil market artificially. And then he started putting sanctions on Iran after he nixed the deal. That curtails the amount of oil on the market. Guess who has the largest oil reserve on the planet? That would be Venezuela. Who has spent a lot of time and energy stopping the shipment of oil out of Venezuela? That would be the Trump presidency. What does that do? That it lessens the amount of oil on the market, which does what? Which helps the Saudis, the Russians, United Arab Emirates. So if Libya was at full production, if Venezuela was at full production, if Iran was at full production, and then you want to bring online the Arctic and the South China Sea, forget about it. Oil would actually maybe drop to $10 or $11 per barrel, but all of those oil companies would go out of business because their technology has matured to the point at which there's not much more they can do to increase the efficiency of a mature economic system like the oil extraction, transmission, and refining system. Whereas renewable energy sources, those technologies continue to – that's not quite Moore's Law. I'm sure you're familiar with Moore's Law and your listeners are familiar with Moore's Law. This is that it's Intel computing power. Moore was head of Intel, and the idea is that computing power will double every single time, so it grows exponentially, and eventually you go from the computing power in your phone dwarfs the computing power that was used to get the astronauts on the moon. That's because of Moore's Law. And it's not quite going at that pace, but it's going pretty fast. As a matter of fact, I was watching Home Shopping Network last night, and you can, for $499, get a battery that can power like 4 appliances and a television set in your house if there's an outage. And guess what? It comes with a solar panel that you can deploy every day. You can open up the solar panel and charge your battery, and then at night you don't have to run a gas generator. They were obviously taking advantage of the hurricane hysteria to try and move product, but that's where we are. I mean, there are roads that are being tested right now. I think the Netherlands has one. I think Singapore might have had one recently as well. The road is made of solar panels. So the road is collecting and converting solar energy, the road. I mean, it's there to be had. You know what I mean? It's there. And I think that in a sense, the end game we're watching is the desperation of the hydrocarbon economic system, the big players, the oil and defense axis, trying to milk as much profit as they can, as long as they can, before the jig is up.
And yet, it's just to what end? It's still, there is this sort of apocalyptic, end times mentality to it, which we also shouldn't ignore. I know that, I don't know, that sort of kind of faded away. Recently, nobody, talks about the influence of the, Christian fundamentalism. I guess that's not chic anymore to talk about, in the alternative or even in the mainstream. But don't forget these people like Mike Pompeo truly do believe in the rapture.
Yes.
100%, and that God will come and smite all the homosexuals and all of the other sort of undesirables, and that this is a good thing, and that his Pompeo believes that his goal, his mission as in government and what else is to bring about that sort of a change.
Yeah, he said so much when he was at the CIA in a speech to assembled officers.
Yeah.
Said it.
So, and you can also look at, some of these other, Eric Prince, when, I want to say this was Keith Olbermann, when he occasionally had something interesting to say. This is years ago, during Bush's administration, when Olbermann had done a whole piece about Eric Prince and the fact that, his sort of ethos at Blackwater was about this sort of that he truly believed himself to be a Christian crusader in the Middle East. And one of Eric Prince's side projects was, collecting biblical artifacts, again, to bring about the rapture.
Yeah.
And you look at Eric, and Eric Prince is all involved in he runs this other company, Frontier Resources Group, which is just a front for going and getting oil.
Well, and also one of the reasons why he wanted to be the viceroy of Afghanistan.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, why is the United States in Afghanistan? Why will the United States never leave Afghanistan? Because could you imagine? I mean, the Taliban was effective. One of the reasons I think why Pakistan was helping to prop up and fund the Taliban initially was to keep the sphere of influence the Iranians could naturally have over Afghanistan, where a large portion of the population speaks Farsi or a Farsi dialect, to keep a overland pipeline going from the second largest gas reserve on the planet, which is Iran, overland into China, which this year is going to be the world's largest consumer of gas, of natural gas. I mean, and what else do they have there? They have rare earths. They have mineral resources that he coveted. And, oh, by the way, Eric Prince, who was part of a meeting in the Seychelles between Mohammed bin Zayed, the crown prince of the United Arab Emirates, arranged in part by a guy named George Nader, who has recently been arrested on pedophilia charges yet again, and child trafficking, sex trafficking, and a guy named Kirill Dmitriev. And Kirill Dmitriev, who appears in the Mueller report, is the head of the Russia's sovereign wealth fund, which that sovereign wealth fund is fed often by by oil and gas revenue, and has worked side by side with United Arab Emirates sovereign wealth fund, which is run by Mohammed bin Zayed. Mohammed bin Zayed, it has been reported more than once, was crucial. Bloomberg had an investigative report on this last year. Was crucial in getting Mohammed bin Salman to the head of the pack in the Game of Thrones inside the Saudi Arabian political maelstrom. And so Mohammed bin Salman has a direct sort of patron-client relationship with Mohammed bin Zayed. And Prince was there meeting with Dmitriev and Zayed on behalf of the Trump administration in the Seychelles. Wonder what all that's about. That's kind of funny. And Kirill Dmitriev, prior to that meeting, predicted that there would be an OPEC plus relationship in the next year. This was right before Trump was elected. And then when Trump was elected, OPEC plus came into fruition. What's OPEC plus? OPEC plus is the first time the OPEC powers have coordinated their production limits with Russia. So Russia and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates have all come together to limit the amount of oil is on the market because they are struggling with the price of oil. So I'm sorry I came back around to that. I just want to get it onto people's radar that peak oil is gone. Peak oil does not exist. There is more oil on this planet than we can use and survive. If human beings burned all of the hydrocarbons on this planet would probably become Venus. And I think it's important to understand that the reason why oil continues to be dominant and why we have a fading and crippled infrastructure that is not being rebuilt. Why? Because that's the infrastructure for hydrocarbons. And if you were going to start a new infrastructure project, you would have to be functionally insane or suicidal to have it be just a new generation designed to transmit hydrocarbon-based energy. Of course, what you would do, the world's largest wind farms are being built in Iowa and Texas. As a matter of fact, Texas is the fastest growing wind energy market in America right now. Texas. So that infrastructure that is fading and decrepit has not been repaired. Why? Because it's not in the interest of the hydrocarbon-based system and the hydrocarbon-based economic profiteers. It's not in their interest to upgrade that infrastructure. It's that's the thing, Pierce. It's there. It's not like it feels like we started with how daunting this all is. But if you start to poke around and you see that, like, South Carolina just green lighted a huge solar project. I'm in California, so I guess it's kind of a cliche, right? I'm going to go eat some granola and hug a tree and whatnot. But I could tell you, I drive around suburbs here in California, a lot of solar panels. And I think one of the most tantalizing aspects of solar power and wind power, but solar power in particular, is the opportunity to create microgrids where instead of being beholden to a large utility that is either government adjacent, government intertwined, heavily government regulated, which means what? If an industry like that is heavily government regulated, that means the industry probably has their cronies in the government regulation office to make sure that they get favorable treatment. That's usually what happens with these things. Microgrids can actually free people to create neighborhood level grids, smaller grids, cooperative grids that free them from the larger grid and free them from the vexing problem of corporate power.
You're right. I mean, this stuff is there, and I think that like you said, we were talking about how daunting this is, but I mean, thankfully, I think people are beginning. Like you were saying in the Carolinas. I mean, it's not a bastion of
no.
Not to generalize, but this isn't like a bastion of progressive environmentalism. And Texas too. But it's interesting that these things are popping up. I mean, in the same token, I think people are, people have this, suddenly everyone is sort of like, oh, damn, plastic is really horrible. Well, I mean, where does plastic come from?
Oil.
Yeah. I mean, it's and everyone kind of gets on board the even I think like the diehard sort of like, people in the alternative that, view climate change as some sort of a hoax. It's the globalists or whatever, which is thankfully kind of fading a bit.
It is.
But even those people see that plastic is evil. Everyone feels bad when a humpback whale washes up on shore dead because it ate so much plastic. Everyone is sort of concerned about the amount of plastic that's in the ocean, and we're eating the fish. Not to mention all the plastic that's just being buried. There's all sorts of really kind of like dark, terrifying things. Plastics cause a lot of endocrinological problems.
Yes.
There's the weird case of that it suppresses certain things so that this is sort of like a what's that movie? Oh God, I can't believe I'm blanking on it. Children of Men.
Yes.
There are cases where if you live in these areas where there's a lot of plastics, you can't conceive male children.
Because plastic is particularly BPA, but plastic as the plastic that we are consuming, and we are consuming it, folks. We're consuming it. You may think you've never eaten plastic. you have plastic in you right now. Particularly if you're drinking drinking water out of plastic bottles. I have not bought a bottle of plastic water in like 13 years.
Mm.
If I will go without, and what's funny, Pierce, is often people will say, "You want a drink of water?" And I would say, "Yeah, only if you have tap water." Mm. They go, "You want to drink water out of a tap?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd rather drink it out of a tap than drink it out of a bottle," because it's not just an endocrine disruptor, plastic. It's an estrogen mimicker.
Yes, that's it.
So it mimics estrogen. Why does America have the by far of advanced, compared to other advanced countries, by far the leader in breast cancer? And female reproductive cancers. I just wonder. We're going to learn a lot about this. We're also starting to get data on that automobile exhaust. Even though we have catalytic converters and it's much cleaner than it was in the 70s, I'm old enough to remember what it was like in the 70s. I've driven in to the LA basin in the late 70s and seen the smog. It's not like that anymore, but the particulate matter, the particulates in the exhaust, still there. And guess what? We're finding it accumulates in your brain. And now we're starting to see potential links between automobile exhaust and air pollution and Alzheimer's and other mental disorders. I wonder. There are so many ways in which this is impacting us that we have been blithely ignorant of over time. And a lot of it's just because the science is finally catching up, and there are larger data sets because we've been exposed for longer periods of time, and now we have multiple populations and different age groups being exposed, so you can study it and whatnot. But we're sort of in a laboratory environment here, in a petri dish that is the outgrowth of this empire of oil that the United States has created. And it's not to say that without U.S. empire, that oil would not have been king. But I wonder how long oil would have been king, because solar power, think about the miracle of, hey, Bob, guess what I discovered? See this thing? If I put this little device in the sun, it takes the sunlight and turns it into electricity. It's like, when that happened, why was that not like, oh my gosh, we've done it. We've got a device that takes sunlight absolutely for free, which will be there as long as the sun is burning, and turns it into electricity. Why did that not suddenly become the most important organizing principle of civilization in 1972, 73, 74? Why? And that's because of the empire of oil. So that's my position on it. That's why I think the empire of oil has catalyzed climate change, because the transition which should have come when Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House for a reason. Right? And what's the first thing the incoming Reagan administration did? Took them down. Yeah, we don't want something that takes sunlight and turns it into energy. We can't have that.
That, JP, and negotiating with the Iranians. See, and again, if you don't think that there's some oil stuff behind that as well,
oh no, of course
you're fooling yourself.
Of course. So the thing is that the transition should have been happening already. We should have an infrastructure already being recharged and rebuilt to accommodate for massive wind farms and other things. And look, it's not like solar and wind are perfect. Wind is going to kill some animals. And if you're going to have a large solar farm in, let's say, the Mojave Desert, you are basically going to say there are parts of this ecosystem, this untouched or mostly untouched ecosystem, that are going to suffer from the presence of the solar panels. And guess what you need for solar panels? You need plastic. And plastic comes from oil. We're not going to get rid of plastic overnight. The thing is shouldn't we use plastic more judiciously and put our plastic into creating solar panels that doesn't produce carbon dioxide, thus continuing to cook the environment and open up the Arctic for more empire?
I know, agreed. And the little things, like you said. Of course, we're not going to get rid of plastic overnight. But seriously, don't That's one thing that you can kind of avoid if you want to. And that's like a little one. And again, I know that seems very, I said before, I was like, recycling isn't going to make a difference, or it doesn't feel like it makes a difference. But at the same time, I mean, just the really kind of like toxic nature of plastic should worry us all. Especially when you get into the kind of the endocrine disruptor, estrogen enhancing sort of aspect of it.
Yes.
Just imagine, giving a baby a bottle they're all made of plastic.
Exactly.
Imagine what that does to a child. And I don't want to I don't even want to really give this energy, but it's so funny. You hear these people that sort of will deny, climate change is, it's a hoax. But they're convinced the frogs are turning gay.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a link between, just the amount of plastics that are in the, that are being exposed to, it's like that they kind of miss the whole point of it.
Yeah, and I'm just sorry to interject, but it's kind of why I made this argument about empires. I want to say to my libertarian friends, you want to get rid of empire, but you don't want to see regulations on climate change. Well, you know what? They're interlocked.
Yes.
The quickest way to get rid of empire is to end oil. Because if America becomes a solar and wind dominant energy consumer, you're not going to need the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. And I wonder how many of the hot spots, where if you look at where the hot spots are, I'll give you another one. Niger, the Niger River Delta. The United States now has its first operating drone base there. Why? Because we have a deep, abiding affection for the people of West Africa.
Right.
No, oil. It's oil. There's oil in Chad. There's oil in Nigeria. If you want a horror show, look at what Chevron's been doing in Nigeria over the years. I mean, that's a horror show. So I'll give you one more on the plastic and the bottled water. Here's another reason why you should think about it. Nestle just got a sweetheart deal in Florida to pump millions of gallons of water out of an aquifer. Nestle's going to put that water in plastic bottles and then sell it to you. So let's just say a bottle, what are they, 8 ounces? See, I don't even buy them anymore, but I think like an 8-ounce bottle, if you went to a AM/PM mini market or a Circle K or whatever, and you wanted to get a bottle of water, it'd be what, like $1.19 maybe?
Something like that.
Cents? Let's just say it's $1. So they're going to sell you 8 ounces at $1. How much do you think you pay for 8 ounces coming out of your tap? Pennies compared to that $1, right? But Nestle is basically has convinced us to buy publicly owned water that they get a sweetheart deal to pump. They just package it in estrogen mimicking, endocrine disrupting plastic and sell it to us basically at gold prices for something that should be, sort of copper prices, right? And instead of us going to our local water systems and saying, hey, we don't trust our water system. We want a new water infrastructure. We want to get rid of lead pipes. We want the best sewage treatment system. We want the best purification systems. We want all the homes in our local town to have the best water coming out of the taps. Instead of putting our time, effort, and money into that, we are basically paying Nestle for the privilege of drinking the public's trust, heretofore publicly owned water, and poisoning ourselves in the process. That's to me, it's one of these insane feedback loops that we've found ourselves in, and I guess in a sense these are all aspects of predatory capitalism, or there's a level of predation in there, and these things become self-reinforcing systems, just like empire and climate and oil, just like the prison system. Now it's privatized water. Everywhere you look, the common good is being rationalized, and it's certainly not in our interest, and it's definitely not in the interest of our health or in the health of the ecosystems that we depend upon to live.
Entirely. I agree completely, echo what you were saying, and just again to the listener, and I don't think anyone listening to this is like unaware of this, but for those that maybe aren't or aren't on board with this, I mean this symbiotic relationship between imperialism and empire and the degradation of the planet is it is there. And this is maybe one of the most pressing issues. And the fact that they are linked, I mean, means that we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. Yeah. In terms of stopping this. We didn't even mention the amount of the Pentagon pollutes through the use of tracer rounds with depleted uranium.
Yes.
I mean, that's talk about another horror story.
Oh, and do you know that the last thing I ever did for the mainstream media was a story on depleted uranium.
Yes.
And there's how about lead bullets? Here's one final thing on the Trump administration. One of the first things they do when they come in, right? The Obama administration put in a new rule that you cannot use lead bullets on public lands. Okay? Because lead, if you fire it around, what does it do? It ends up poisoning streams, rivers. It's poisoning. It's poisoning animals. It's poisoning birds, particularly apex predators and raptors. And so you can shoot copper. You can still shoot. You just had to shoot copper bullets. Nope. First thing they did. Nope. We want lead. We want lead. It is so gratuitous. It's so gratuitous. You can use copper. Nope. We got to have lead. That kind of indifference in the face gets back to something you talked about. There is an element here of evangelicalism that suffuses a lot of this, and the idea that this planet, get it while it's hot, baby. Take what you can while you can, because it's all going away, because for them, the planet is a limited time offer. Act now.
It is a sort of a dark and kind of depressing outlook, JP, but it is, that is sort of what we're up against. I don't want to leave everyone feeling super depressed. So with the final 3 minutes, JP Sottille, of course, of newsvandal.com, is there anything, is there a silver lining? Is there anything positive? Can we reverse this?
Yeah. Britain, right? Famous for using coal. Last year, they had 1 week without coal. All their energy came without the use of coal. This year, it was 2 weeks. Almost a plurality of the energy that Scotland is using comes from wind. It is happening. It can happen. It is not unreachable. It is a real possibility, and frankly, it's a real likelihood if we can find a way to link climate change with empire and maybe create a kind of coalition of people who are interested in either one or both of those issues and actually extricate ourselves from a system that is actually dying anyway because it's oversupplied, overstretched, and it's not really a long-term winner, according to the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, who see oil investments as a multi-trillion-dollar boondoggle of stranded assets as the hydrocarbon system collapses. It's just a matter of, is it going to collapse in a giant catastrophic boom, or is it going to be a slow evolutionary transition to a different system that does not destroy the ecosystems upon which we depend to live?
Well, we are going to have to leave it there. I want to thank JP Sottille for joining us here in the first hour. I encourage everyone to go and check out all of his work, which you can find at newsvandal.com. Sign up for the News Vandal Rundown as well. Thank you all for tuning into this first hour. We will be continuing this conversation and exploring other topics in the second hour, so please stay tuned.
right out of the subway in New York City. Yeah, baby. The radio show that never sleeps. Porkins Policy Radio with Pierce Redmond.
WallStreetWindow.com. Gold, silver, the stock market. WallStreetWindow.com. The brilliant author of The War State brings you exclusive reports about the big changes upcoming in the markets. WallStreetWindow.com.
Perhaps you're invested deeply.
Perhaps you're not in deep enough. Maybe you're thinking about getting started. WallStreetWindow.com. Michael Swanson, the brilliant author of The War State, understood these trends professionally for many years, and now he gives you the benefit of his knowledge. WallStreetWindow.com. Go there now. Go there now. Go there now.
A reminder that this is the Voice of America broadcasting worldwide.
The age of transitions.
Warning, warning, warning.
Uncle, the podcast.
The Ocelli effect.
Porkins Policy Radio with Pierce Redmond.
On Ocelli.com.
Uncle, somebody told me the other day that martial law is coming. We're going to get thrown into the FEMA camp. Should I be scared or not?
No. That is a,
It might be true. Could be.
Could be, but I don't think so.
I'll bet I know who would know. Somebody who does a show on the Ocelli.com radio network.
Somebody will know. Charlie.com would know. He will know.
Better listen to it.
Better listen to him. And he knows what he's talking about.
Ocelli.com.
Charlie.com.
Well, I was sitting around my house. Oh, and as I looked around, you know the worries in my life are sure to bring me down. Because I try so hard to be all of the things you said for me. But your shoes are so hard to fill, yes, and living in your shadow is hard for me. Oh, but I'll be alright if you hold me through the night. Put your loving arms around me, yeah, make everything alright. Whoa, 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 I'll be alright if you hold me through the night. No, this journey won't be easy, no, but one day we'll see the light. Whoa, 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 whoa. Well, they say and I believe that no one knows what fate can bring. But I just can't help but feel like I've been missing everything. Because I made you my whole world. Now that you're gone, it's hard to see. And though your time in this life was cut short, I'll still make you proud of me. Whoa, 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 whoa.
entertainment, and more. You will learn something, children's. Ocelli.com.
Now back to the man, Pierce Redman.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Porkins Policy Radio. I am your host, Pierce Redman. If you are joining us here in the second hour, we're going to be doing, I'm going to be going solo, but we do have, I think, some special guests last minute that will be joining me. And we're going to be discussing, we're going to be kind of shifting gears a little bit and discussing some what is a very sort of like groundbreaking or earth-shattering news vis-a-vis 9/11 and the continued investigation into it, particularly covering up the influence of the Saudi royal family. We're going to be getting to that in just a minute, but quickly, I did promise, or I did say in the first hour that I would sort of tease out a little bit. I mentioned in the bonus podcast for the month of August, there was a little extra thing, and that is I included a little sort of update on the current project that I'm working on, which is partly why I was unable to get a bonus podcast out for August. That is because I'm working on a book right now. It is related to, you guessed it, Jeffrey Epstein. Very early stages of that. But that is sort of the big project that I'm working on that I want to get done. I don't know exactly when, but hopefully sooner rather than later. So if you're interested in the book or the project, if you're interested in supporting me in that endeavor, then I encourage you to go to patreon.com/Pierce Redman, and you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. That will help out tremendously, not only with the show, but also with doing the book. And I will have updates about the book. I will have a little bit more information about that probably soon. But all of that will be relayed to you vis-a-vis the bonus podcast. So if you want to learn more about that, then definitely go and subscribe. But like I promised, we wouldn't be covering Jeffrey Epstein, and we won't be here in the second hour. I wanted to actually talk about some very interesting articles and that were pointed to. I was pointed to by good friend of the show, John Gold. Of course, we were lied to about 9/11. Is the book by John as well as the podcast. We'll link up to his website. But John sent me some interesting articles talking about a few things. One being our illustrious Attorney General, William Barr, is about to decide if a key name in a 9/11 case is going to be revealed to us or if it will be a state secret. And I believe John Gold is on the line. So why don't we bring John on to kind of explore this a bit more. John Gold, are you there?
Hi, Pierce. Hi, Chuck. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely, John. It's good to hear from you. It's been a little while, I think, since you've been on the – well, I guess you called in not that long ago, but it's been a while since you and I really kind of had the time to, kind of talk at length. But let's
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say let's just sort of dive into this. Let's talk about, I guess, the first one being this, William Barr – is he has until, I believe it's until this Friday, to rule on whether or not a name will be, I guess, unredacted. And this is related to a very infamous FBI memo that was, I can't remember the exact date of when this memo was written. I believe it's 2012. But this is talking about individuals that were aiding 9/11 hijackers Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. We know in this particular memo, we know of two of the people that were aiding them. This would be Omar al-Bayoumi and al-Thumairy, Fahad al-Thumairy. They were aiding these two 9/11 hijackers, but there was a third individual. And John, you and I have talked about this particular memo, but maybe you can just sort of remind the listeners a little bit about this particular memo and why this is so important right now. The fact that it is now in front, or it's on, William Barr's desk right now, and we'll have to see how he rules on it. But what is this memo exactly?
Well, okay. First off, I have to give a lot of credit to Dan Christensen of the Florida Bulldog for the job that he's done with regard to the Sarasota cover-up. Okay, so I guess the memo you're referring to, or the name of the person believed to be a Saudi government official, and this is directly from Dan's report, is contained in a highly censored October 2012 FBI summary report obtained by the Florida Bulldog in 2016 during ongoing Freedom of Act litigation. The report is now at the center of a massive consolidated civil lawsuit in New York as lawyers for thousands of 9/11 survivors and victims' families seek to obtain an uncensored copy with the name in the face of what they say is FBI stonewalling. So there's a person who was tasked al-Thumairy and al-Bayoumi to help the two San Diego hijackers, alleged hijackers, and so forth. So that's the name that the families are trying to get, along with, I think there's 80,000 documents that the Florida Bulldog is trying to get. And also there's news concerning that. A U.S. judge just ordered the release of the FBI records, and this is from another report from Dan Christensen. A federal judge has ruled the FBI unlawfully withheld from the Florida Bulldog key sections of records of its investigation of a Saudi family that fled Sarasota 2 weeks before the 9/11 attacks, leaving behind cars, clothes, furniture, food, and other belongings. The FBI, or the Bulldog, sued the FBI for the records in 2012. And for 7 years, the Bulldog has been fighting to unveil this important paragraph, as well as other withheld information, on grounds that they might shed light on whether the Saudi government was complicit in 2001 with the 9/11 hijackers, a position that thousands of 9/11 victims' families and survivors have taken in lawsuits against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Now, George Daniels, there's a U.S. District Judge, George Daniels, has focused a large and important New York case on 9/11 hijacker connections to probable Saudi agents in San Diego. To date, he has held that evidence the hijackers may have been assisted by possible Saudi agents elsewhere in the U.S. was too tenuous even to explore. So there's a new ruling on August 22nd by Fort Lauderdale Senior U.S. District Judge William J. Zalak, rejects the FBI's claim that the withheld paragraph would reveal secret techniques and procedures. Zalak also ordered the release of an FBI analysis note from 2011, which appears to comment on the April 2016 Many Connections memo, which is the one you're referring to. There was a memo from April 16, 2002 from an FBI guy that said there were many connections to the Saudi government, and I think the FBI Review Commission in 2012 said that was incorrect.
That's what I was thinking of. That's what the 2012 is what I was thinking of.
Right. Yeah. And this is what the Florida Bulldog and Dan Christensen has been involved with, as well as Anthony Summers, who wrote in his book about this 11th day, where a lot of this came to light. So basically, the judge sided with the Florida Bulldog. They're giving the FBI a chance to appeal it, but we'll see. So that was a good thing. And, again, Bill Barr, guy who was okay with the pardoning of Iran-Contra criminals, is now tasked with deciding if he's going to release this name that would be helpful in the family's lawsuit against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And he has until Friday to do so. So today, the 9/11 family members They have a site, declassified911.org, which has been up for a while. There's so much documentation concerning 9/11 that has yet to be released from the 9/11 Commission and so many other things. But anyway, they put up an action alert to try and put pressure on Bill Barr to release this name, as well as all the other stuff. If you go to declassified911.org, it will take you to this. It says, 9/11 community urgent call to action. We need your voice to be heard by September 6, 2019. September 6 is the deadline for the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, to provide the court with its decision regarding whether or not they will give 9/11 families the documents which reveal senior-level Saudi officials' complicity in 9/11. This decision cannot and should not happen without the DOJ and FBI knowing how important it is for us and the nation that they represent our interests, not Saudi Arabia's. For 18 years, the FBI and DOJ have protected the Saudi government from embarrassment over its role in the attacks of 9/11. This must end now. And then there's a link that says what you can do, or what you can do now. And it reminds you that the deadline is this Friday. And it says, at a congressional hearing on July 23, 2019, Federal Bureau of Investigation Director Christopher Wray refused to tell the U.S. Senate if his department would produce documents, and further, he refused to meet with 9/11 community members. The Department of Justice and FBI have ignored the unanimously passed United States Senate Resolution 610 to declassify the 9/11 documents. The FBI and Department of Justice have until September 6, 2019 to provide the court with its decision regarding whether or not they will give 9/11 families the documents that would reveal Saudi officials' involvement in 9/11. And they give you a list of telephone numbers that you can call, as well as email addresses for people you can email to, tell them to release this documentation, as well as the name. To try and put pressure on it. And I wish Jon Stewart would pick up the ball on this one and try to put some pressure out there again. This is something the families have been fighting forever. Since it happened, to find out what happened, who was responsible, why it happened, and so on and so forth. They're still 18 years later, still fighting for this stuff. And this is what celebrities should be putting their names to, like Jon Stewart. Truth, justice, and accountability is extremely important concerning the mass murder of 2,977 plus people. John Field, who worked with Jon Stewart to get, the healthcare and all that stuff passed, he's constantly posting these deaths on Facebook of 9/11 first responders that are dying. Like every day, another one dies.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking. That's why I say 2,977 plus, because they just keep dying. And we've never had justice or accountability or truth for this. And it's still ongoing, and it's very frustrating. For me, and I'm not even a family member, I can't imagine what it's like for family members. I just can't imagine. So if you can help, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. Continue, John. Continue.
If you can help, put pressure on Bill Barr, the families would be extremely appreciative of that.
No, absolutely. We'll link up to this. Also, if you go to declassify911.org, there is a petition that you can sign, urging Bill Barr to release this name. There's also it's a great website. They provide phone numbers as well, and emails to contact the FBI New York headquarters, DOJ, the attorney's office. I mean, these numbers are they're staffed all the time. A lot of them 24 hours a day, particularly like the FBI. And you can call them, and you can kind of even if enough people call, that's something. That's we're not letting this sort of for lack of a better word, just sort of die out there. Just to be clear, what we're talking about right now with Bill Barr is related to San Diego, and particularly the two hijackers, al-Hazmi and al-Mihdhar, who were in San Diego. We'll get to the Sarasota stuff as well, because I want to explore that a bit more with you, John. But just specifically on the San Diego thing, what a lot of these families are involved in lawsuits, ongoing lawsuits right now, to reveal not only the name of this one person, but, as you said, some 80,000 pages of other things. I'm just going to read from this sort of infamous FBI report. At this meeting, al-Bayoumi advised the hijackers to relocate to San Diego, which they did. Once in San Diego, al-Bayoumi assisted the hijackers with a place to live, opening a bank account, and also assigned 2 individuals to care for them, one of whom was Modar Abdullah. Then it's 3 sentences, or 2.5 sentences are redacted. It picks up again. Contact with al-Thumairy and al-Bayoumi while the hijackers were in Los Angeles and San Diego areas. There is evidence that redacted and tasked al-Thumairy and al-Bayoumi with assisting the hijackers. And just to kind of, nail this point on, what is redacted there is this third individual, believed, as you said, to be a high-level Saudi government official. One that you and I, John, have speculated on this show is a name that we're probably all fairly familiar with, even if you don't know much or anything about 9/11 or the Saudi royal family. And for 18 years now, the FBI and the U.S. government, the DOJ, has basically protected this Saudi individual from any sort of prosecution or from any just sort of accountability. And, we're at a critical juncture right now with only a few days left to pressure Bill Barr into revealing who this person is. And I'll throw this to you, John. I mean, my take is I honestly don't expect Bill Barr to, release this name. I'm pretty sure he will invoke, state privileges, state secret privileges, anything that he can do. As you rightfully pointed out, Bill Barr is, of course, someone that, basically got everyone involved in Iran-Contra, out of jail, and protected them. So I'm not super confident that he will reveal this name. I mean, what's your sense, looking at Bill Barr?
Well, I don't trust Bill Barr any further than I can throw him. And we have no reason to trust this man, that he will do the right thing. But you never know. Hopefully, he does the right thing for the family's sake. But I don't know. I don't want to speculate as to what he'll do, but it doesn't look good from the standpoint of who this person is. I don't mean to bring up Jeffrey Epstein, but isn't he connected, or wasn't his father connected to Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And again, I mean, I don't. It's okay to bring it up. I mean, but I mean, yes, exactly. You look at something like that, and this isn't to. I would never want to compare, different people's traumas, but and not to diminish the trauma that Jeffrey Epstein caused. But I mean, when we're looking at 9/11, we're talking about a global trauma. We're fighting multiple foreign wars based on the essentially lies of 9/11 that are continuing right now. The sort of continued cover up, or at least certainly protection of some of our allies right now. We're talking about Saudi Arabia. I mean. So, again, right, like you said, I mean, bringing up the Epstein thing, I don't really have any confidence that Bill Barr is going to get to the bottom of Jeffrey Epstein. And, so when you're looking at something like 9/11, probably the greatest crime of the century, really, especially when you think about the sort of global crime of all of this. I mean, yeah, I don't have much faith. But again, I'm sort of confident just in the fact that, this is 18 years on. I hope that this will kind of at least illuminate to people that this is by no means over or solved, and that these these are sort of real ongoing issues that we haven't gotten to the bottom of.
Why is it only Dan Christensen or the Herald Tribune of Florida, Florida outlets, the only news outlets that are covering this issue? And, that should also speak volumes to people as to how much of a problem this has been. I mean, this is one instance, one action that the families are calling for us to do. There have been, I don't know, maybe 100 or over 100 since the attacks where the families have asked us to do things to help, and the media ignores it. So, that should also speak volumes to people that the media has been complicit in the cover-ups of 9/11, and the same media that pushed Russiagate for 3 years. And,
it's funny on that, John, is and you and I have talked about this before too. I mean, with the Russiagate stuff, the mainstream media is sort of in love with that particular conspiracy theory, but when it comes to, these like actual tangible things, like ongoing 9/11 victims, and family members suing Saudi Arabia or others, we've done numerous reports on this show talking about, updates to those things. The media just, like you said, kind of ignores it. It's like, what was it? It's and this is by no means a comparison. People should really check out FloridaBulldog.org. Dan Christensen is a phenomenal journalist. I'm only familiar with his work through you, John. And maybe we'll try and extend an invite to Dan if he'd like to come on the show to talk about this more. But it's like that, and then it was Fox and Friends. Did a little piece talking about this. I mean, that's not nearly the amount of coverage that it deserves with this. And it's funny, the media is still kind of obsessed with the Epstein stuff, and floating all sorts of conspiracy theories. And you've got a lot of people making money off of this in the alternative, or the so-called alternative. But when it comes to this, it's complete silence. Nothing.
Right.
It's just shocking.
This stuff has been going on for a while, so maybe if they cover it, they have to acknowledge the fact that they haven't covered it after all these years.
Right.
This has been going on, and we haven't covered it, but now we're going to cover it, and so now you're aware that we weren't covering it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is totally what was going on with the Epstein stuff. You get the New York Times and others now pretending like they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they're they're just the greatest journalists of all time. They've got all these great sources and stuff, and it's like it's a little late getting to this. I know we're probably kicking a dead horse here, but we're less than a week. Or almost tomorrow will be a week, till 9/11, the 18th anniversary.
Also my birthday.
Also, really?
Tomorrow's my birthday.
Oh, tomorrow's your birthday. I was going to say just 9/11. I was like, how did I not know that?
No.
Oh.
There is someone I know, Emmanuel Espario, who was involved in the 9/11 Truth Fund. He was actually born on September 11th.
Oh, yeah, anyway, I know a couple of people. But, well, John, an early happy birthday to you. For tomorrow, but we're very near the 18th anniversary, and I know that we'll have all the sort of obligatory, ubiquitous, rah 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 America, and we'll have maybe Trump will come to New York and salute at the memorial, and there will be some the sort of the everyday stuff, but I doubt we're going to see news outlets running with, Bill Barr once again covering up for a U.S. ally that was involved.
Well, it's also good. What I'm expecting to happen is it's going to happen on a Friday. He has until Friday. So yes. I imagine there'll be part of the Friday news cycle that he'll drop it saying, no, I'm not going to release this, or, the state secrets privilege applies and so forth. So that's going to suck too if it does happen on that Friday.
Oh yeah, what a great day for him to pick too.
Exactly.
Once you do it, especially too after Labor Day weekend, everyone is people are sort of starting up work now in earnest. No one's paying attention, and it's just I don't know. Again, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but it should be deeply disturbing to everyone that 18 years from now we still don't know the basic facts, the timeline. Who was helping Thumairy and Bayoumi, which we should also point out. I mean, we're talking about two people with government connections.
Right.
I think it was Bayoumi was an ambassador or worked in the consul general's office to Saudi Arabia. I think maybe Thumairy was believed to be a spy. I might have mixed those two up, but these guys should be brought in for trial. But beyond that, we still go ahead,
those
John.
are the two that Judge Daniel was allowed discovery on, but he didn't allow discovery on Osama Biznan, which was disappointing because Osama Biznan had direct financial ties to Prince Bandar. Prince Bandar literally gave him money from his account. There was a story prior that the two San Diego hijackers got financial help from Bandar's wife, but this was direct money from Bandar to Biznan. But, as I said, Daniels didn't allow discovery on Biznan, so I don't know why he did that. But anyway, so we have Thumairy and al-Bayoumi, and they had apparently a handler who tasked them with assisting the hijackers, and that's the name that we want. Now, you said earlier that we had speculated before on what that name was. Who were you thinking of?
I was either thinking of possibly Bandar or some other, another sort of high-ranking Saudi official. One of these guys who sort of just floats around. He's defense secretary, and then he's foreign minister. Someone like that. I wonder if it wasn't directly Bandar, especially when you look at the fact that his wife seems to be giving money to these guys. Some of them are turning up, with business cards of his and phone numbers direct, related to Bandar's name. Residencies. So I wonder if it's. Prince Bandar also seems like the type of person that they would go to those lengths to protect. There are other princes that have been named as being
Bandar's the one who said that. Bandar's the one who said Saudi intelligence was tracking the hijackers with, quote, precision. He's the one who once threatened Britain, I think, with a terrorist attack if they had released documentation concerning the BAE scandal.
Correct.
So Bandar knows how the terrorist system works and has used it. Used it in Syria when that whole thing started to happen. So I don't know. It could be Bandar, it could be someone else, but we don't know.
No, of course.
It was fairly easy to guess that Bandar was named being withheld from the 28 redacted pages. Based on all of the clues that the Congress people who were pushing for the release of those pages were telling us, it's a name that we would recognize. And so who would that have been? But with regard to the name from this other documentation, I don't know. But again, Bandar's wife supposedly financially sent money that made its way to those two hijackers, so it might make sense that it was Bandar. He was also connected, as I said, to Biznan, so it might make sense that it was him, but I don't know.
Right, no, and totally speculation. Obviously, whoever it is important enough that the Attorney General is going to protect a foreign, just a citizen. That's not to disparage against people not from America, but again, this is the U.S. Attorney General is protecting a foreign individual from being tried in an American court for at least aiding in some part in the largest, most spectacular mass murder globally and on American soil that we've ever seen.
Well,
again, he's draining the swamp, right, John?
Yeah, and Bandor, when MBS went on his little public tour saying how great Saudi Arabia was going to be back in, 2017 or 18?
Mm-hmm.
And Bandor accompanied him, and they went to a secret dinner in Washington, D.C., where Dick Cheney attended, where Colin Powell attended. And, Bandor was there, so he was allowed to come and go in the country. His daughter is now the ambassador to the United States. The Bandor name just keeps coming up, and I'm sure every time it does, it's just a slap in the face to the families. And it's a slap in the face to me. It pisses me off. So I just can't imagine what it does to the families.
Just wait till we see Bandor's name in Jeffrey Epstein's black book, or on the flight logs.
Right,
maybe
exactly.
Then we'll be allowed to talk about it.
Exactly. I have to give so much credit to Whitney Webb for the reporting that she's done on this issue. And I highly recommend, and I don't mean to recommend another person's show, but Abby and Robbie just did an interview with her that was really well done. I listened to it, and it was really well done. So I highly recommend people go listen to Media Roots and their interview with Whitney.
No, that's okay. It's okay to promote Robbie and Abby on the show. Anytime. So no hard feelings there, John. Switching gears a little bit because again, you and I have we've talked a lot over the years about this this FBI memo talking about this high-ranking Saudi official. Let's and this again, and I've always been particularly fascinated with what happened in San Diego. Again, people should look into al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi. There's just so much there, from their FBI informant, landlord, to all of these other people that were sort of they just sort of happened to bump into while in San Diego. But switching it to Florida, and not to to a place that I think many people kind of associate with 9/11. Let's talk about what's going on vis-a-vis the Sarasota probe, because that's like sort of one of these, perhaps even more so than the San Diego stuff. I mean, what was going on in Sarasota has really never been fully explored, by anyone in the mainstream media. And this is talking about the alleged connections between this a very sort of well-to-do family, the and I'm going to butcher this probably, al-Hijj family, Hijji. I know that's probably wrong, but they're supposedly there's evidence that this particular family had an very close relationship. I think this is where we get the quote many connections report by the FBI on them to several 9/11 hijackers, including Mohammed Atta, and they sort of mysteriously just disappeared. And you quoted from Dan Christensen's article earlier, leaving behind cars, clothes, furniture, food, and other belongings. The FBI believe, when they went there, they said, well, this looks like they were sort of leaving, just sort of in the middle of the night on a whim. This was not planned. What is going on with the with this particular avenue of 9/11, because we've got a U.S. judge ordering the release of FBI records related to the Sarasota probe, and of course the FBI and others can use all sorts of secrecy laws in order to sort of prevent this. But explain a little bit to the listeners, I mean, the Sarasota connection and why this is so important, and again why we need to kind of put feet to the fire here when it comes to this.
Well, because it's another instance of the possible connection between the Saudi government and the hijackers. And as I mentioned earlier, a judge ruled that the documentation that the Bulldog is suing for should be released, and they're giving the FBI an opportunity to appeal that. That's where we are right now. I mean, I remember reading Turkey Val-Fazl was asked a question about this instance that happened in Sarasota and acted as if there was nothing to it. He acted as if the entire situation with Saudi Arabia and 9/11 has been resolved. And he even referenced the 9/11 report, the one from 2004, as being the thing that absolved the Saudi government. So he's just acting like it's not even a thing anymore. So I don't know. I don't know where we are with it. Beyond, what we know already, what Dan Christensen has reported on, which you've already referenced. The connections to Muhammad Atta and stuff like that. So, there's nothing new to report.
Let me,
other than the fact...
No, go ahead. Finish your thought, John.
Other than the fact that the judge ruled that the documentation should be released.
I was going to just throw this in because it's I think it's relevant not only to this, but just to, these sort of deep events. So while the judge has ordered that they release these stuff, and again, I'm not going to hold my breath. I doubt that the FBI will do this. There's some interesting tactics that the FBI can use that can basically prevent information like this coming out. And it's interesting because it dates back to a time period I know that you're interested in right now, John, or exploring it. This would be the mid-'80s at the height of Iran-Contra, which of course utilized a lot of people that would be instrumental in helping to lie and cover up at certain aspects of 9/11. Of course, would have sort of cut their teeth, so to speak, in Iran-Contra. But this is from Dan Christensen's article in the Florida Bulldog. He talks about this sort of rule or this amendment that can kind of play in the FBI's favor. And this is basically the FBI can essentially say that documents that exist don't exist. And I'll read from this. This is Dan Christensen, quote, "That authority was granted in a 1986 amendment to the Freedom of Information Act that incorporated an, quote, exclusion that allows the FBI to treat classified records about foreign intelligence or counterintelligence or international terrorism as, quote, not subject to the requirements, end quote, of the Act. Justice Department guidelines say that means that those who request excluded records can be told there exist no records responsive to your FOIA request." So just another like Alice in Wonderland. Jump in.
I wonder if the mandatory classification review applies to that. Like if they say something like that, can you go? Which is the next level beyond a FOIA request, which I think requires them to review things and, they get a panel together, I think, to review things and whether or not it can be released. So I don't know if that applies or not, but
I don't know.
It sounds like a loophole.
Yeah, exactly. I would assume that what's interesting about this particular one is that they don't have to actually state that, like, oh, this is like state secrets, They don't have to invoke anything like that or national security, which they will do all the time. They can simply state that these records don't exist, which they will already do. If you submit a FOIA and you get one little thing wrong, they can basically, or if you use a particular phrase, they can say, oh, well, that doesn't exist. That phrase that you use doesn't, there's nothing relevant to that. There are no records exist, even though it might just be, totally kind of subjective as to what it is. But so I think what's interesting about this particular clause is I don't think they have to, they're not stating that, oh, because of foreign intelligence, the records, we can't review. They're just saying there's nothing there,
Right.
And I think that basically kind of stops a lot of people from resubmitting FOIAs because, I guess they don't exist, even when they clearly they do.
I've never been a FOIA person. I know, my friend Eric Larson used to go to the National Archives and manually scan documents from the 9/11 Commission and place them online for people. I think he put upwards of 5,000 to 8,000 documents from the 9/11 Commission. But I've never been into FOIAs. I tried it once and I got shot down. I'm like, whatever. I was more about, if I read a report in the news, contacting the individuals in the report and getting it from them, what the story is. That's what I used to do. But I don't know. I did an entire show on FOIAs and MFRs or mandatory declassification review with Brian McGlinchey on my series that we relied to about 9/11 podcast. If people are interested in all that stuff.
Yeah, people should definitely check out John's podcast and also the book version of it. Well, we've got I think about 13 minutes left, and I did want to kind of wrap up on another interesting 9/11 related news item. I don't know if you saw this, John, but I saw this earlier. It was this was from Carol Rosenberg at the New York Times, who's sort of an interesting
Gitmo.
Yes, journalist. She's the Gitmo correspondent. She used to write for the Miami Herald for many years. Now she writes.
Now she works for the Times.
The Times, but generally, Carol Rosenberg is actually just sort of, she's reporting news and facts. There's not a lot of sort of editorial when it comes to her.
She's the go-to person for the trials.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, she has an article up just a couple of days ago on August 30th. Trial for men accused of plotting 9/11 attacks is set for 2021. I assume you saw this, John. I mean, again, we're not there's nothing like new, I guess, with this. It's more just our sort of general frustration, I guess, is what I wanted to talk about. But I mean, what the hell is going on with that? I mean, they're setting this date for January, and it may not even happen.
Right. They could reschedule it or say something happened every time. I mean, there's no. Gitmo, first of all, everybody has to understand that it is a kangaroo court. There's no legitimacy to the military tribunals in Gitmo, based on so many shenanigans over the years. It just completely disqualifies the credibility of that court as far as I'm concerned. And as far as many family members are concerned, it's also a kangaroo court, they consider it to be. So whatever happens in 2021, it's just going to be, as far as long as they're a laughing stock. But again, they can reschedule it, or some other shenanigans, more shenanigans can happen, and it would be rescheduled.
It's interesting though, because this is I believe this is the first time that a date has even been set, which is I
don't know if that's true. I remember so much talk of, a trial date being set, and it's just being pushed back. So I don't know if it's the first time.
It was I might be wrong. I thought that this was the first time that a literal date was set. Because I know that there was like talk about they're going to do the trial, and then there was, Obama attempted to hold the trial in New York City.
Right.
Which would be the correct venue. That was sort of shouted down. Again, I'm sure
Did you see the people who came out? Did you see the people who came out to say that it should not happen in New York City? I think it's many of the same people that have lobbied for the MEK.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. Giuliani and Bolton, all the the regulars. When it comes to the MEK and this lovely communist Muslim sex cult. That's what all of these right wingers are supporting when it comes to the MEK. And I'm being a little unfair maybe in the definition.
People who are always doing the wrong thing. It's just the people who are always doing the wrong thing.
Exactly. Oh no, there's plenty of liberals that love the MEK as well. But yeah, no, it's again, we're beating a dead horse, but the trial that we're talking about is for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and I think there's 4 others that will also be
right, the 9/11-5 is what I recall.
Yes, and this is Walid bin Atash, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Ammar al-Baluchi, who's KSM's nephew, and Mustafa al-Hawasawi. So so these are the 5 men. They're all. I assume they'll be kind of tried together. But again, I mean, first off, nobody knows those other names. Those are sort of like, oh, what? Like these people, like, they were all captured in Pakistan, but no one's really like up on who they are. But again, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he's still there. And still, they haven't even started the trial. I mean, I know, I'm sure we're just sort of preaching to the choir, but it's insane, John, that that we're even reading articles like this. I mean, it sounds, and again, too, it's another year. It's interesting too. It'll be after the elections, almost like and there's absolutely something is being, that's part of this as well. And keep in mind, while you can think that whatever is going on in Guantanamo, this is the military and stuff, Trump is having a say, or people within his administration are absolutely having a say in how this is done. Of course. If Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other 4 are convicted, it's the Secretary of Defense that determines the method of execution.
Well, one thing I am confident in is that if there are shenanigans, that KSM's lawyer will speak out about it, because he has been consistent in doing so. But it's just, I don't see it 20 years after the fact. How is that any form of justice? It's just a joke, all of it. But I got to let you go.
Okay, John.
But thanks for having me on, and thanks for talking about this and bringing this up.
Please, yeah, anytime.
So if you are listening, please go to declassify911.org and see what you can do to help.
Absolutely.
Put pressure on Bill Barr.
For sure. We will link up to that in the show notes, as well as to John's website and his Twitter handle as well. And yeah, I really do encourage people to go and sign the petition, or just even just educating people about this. I think most people are probably unaware that this is even on Bill Barr's table right now. In much the same way that I think many people are unaware that not only is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed still rotting in prison there, with no charges, but I mean, there hasn't been a trial. There's nothing, and it probably won't happen either. I don't want to. I know this has been a very kind of pessimistic show, but it's deeply troubling. And again, like I said, scheduling this for after the election is deliberate, because that can just basically make sure that whatever happens in the election, that whoever comes in can pull something else, make sure that this doesn't really come out. Keep in mind too, as well, if this trial goes forward, now there will be a way for families of 9/11 victims and survivors to view the trial. These will be on military bases in New York, Massachusetts, and Maryland. I believe there will also be, if I'm reading this correctly from Carol Rosenberg's article, there will also be the general public will also be able to view a feed from a video feed in Fort Meade, Maryland. But there will be a 40-second delay on the feed, the stream or whatever, because of course, anytime something actually important or relevant comes up related to national security, then they'll just sort of edit that out. and we won't really be hearing what's going on. So that's already an issue. Not to mention the fact that most of the, like discovery and things like that documents, they're not being released. And I doubt that they will when it comes to, like, again, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. There's a lot of documentation that that him and his lawyers have been trying to get access to that the CIA and others will just say, oh, no, you can't look at that. And that'll just sort of be the end of that. And again, there's a reason they put Guantanamo on Cuba. They don't want you to know what's going on. They don't want you to know what's happening. That's why, it's called Camp Justice. They're slapping you in the face. When you hear these people complaining and railing on about the Cubans and stuff, I mean, we literally have a base on Cuba to torture and hold people indefinitely and to cover up the true nature of the most impactful crime that we've seen in a century, probably. And just to sort of tie it all together again, what we were talking about in the first hour, empire, oil, it's all related, with 9/11. And, 9/11 was just sort of kick-started so much of the sort of real intense drama with empire and oil. But I will leave it there for this week's episode. I hope to have Carl Zah on the show either next week or the week after to discuss the Hong Kong protests. So definitely tune in for that. And again, will be lots more new episodes on some different topics. So thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon.